Hey everyone, Gill here, and it is time for another Mailbag, where I answer your questions, comments, takes, concerns, and all that good stuff about tennis, or really whatever you want. About 24 hours ago, over 24 hours ago now, I posted in the community tab of my YouTube channel, which can be found on the homepage, and we got 65 comments, a very strong number. I didn't tweet this time. My apologies for anyone who likes to get in on the action via Twitter. But I just went pure YouTube here. Hope everyone's doing well. Happy Juneteenth. And let's get going. First one comes from Ankit Reddy. How does Djokovic's forehand compare to Federer and Nadal's forehands in terms of consistency and effectiveness, as measured by topspin, power, pace, and variety? I understand that Nadal and Federer are widely considered to have the greatest forehands in tennis history, but is the difference between their forehand ground strokes and Novak's truly significant? It's a really good question. Well, I'll say this. Novak's forehand is not as much of a weapon as Federer's and Nadal's. That is to say that you're not really afraid of Djokovic's forehand in a neutral baseline rally to the same extent that you're terrified of Nadal and Federer's forehand. It's just not quite as damaging from neutral positions. But you got to take a more holistic look at what a shot is, especially if we're classifying a ground stroke as broadly as to just say the forehand. Meaning, how consistent is it? Can you defend with it? And if you really take those things into account, Novak's forehand is criminally underrated. And I don't know if that's just because his backhand is so good that no one really wants to talk about the forehand. That's likely the reason why. And I think we see the same thing with Nadal with his forehand, and no one wants to talk about his backhand. But all things considered, Djokovic's forehand is world class. And if you just look at the comment and you look at the categories, you know, it's not that I won't take Federer and Nadal's forehand over Djokovic's, because I will. But there are some areas where Djokovic is just as good, if not better. So first, topspin, Nadal and Federer have Djokovic beat. Power, Nadal has the most powerful forehand of the three. Djokovic and Federer are kind of even. Pace is, to me, pace and power are kind of the same. But if you replace that with timing, the ability to redirect, the ability to take the ball on the rise and hit clean, that is probably Djokovic's best attribute on his forehand side. I think he redirects the ball so well. I think he's very precise on that wing. And he's right up there with Federer and Nadal in that respect. And then variety, I also think he lags behind. He doesn't mix up his heights and his spins and his angles as quite as much as Federer and Nadal. But the answer to your question is the difference between their forehands, between Djokovic's forehand and Federer and Nadal's forehand, significant? Probably not as significant as people would like to make it out to be. Who is winning the U.S. Open in French as of what you think right now? Parentheses, can't tiptoe around the answer. And half of that comment was in all caps, I'll have you know. Okay. You want picks? I'll give you picks. That comment came from OCS. So I got to say Dominic Thiem wins the U.S. Open. Rafael Nadal wins the French. Those are my picks as of now. A lot of that has to do with physical conditioning, and I think the packed schedule will really benefit Dominic Thiem, who is the most in-shape player on tour, for my money. But I also think motivation might be a bigger factor than usual. And I think Thiem is still obviously so hungry for his first. I'm wondering if he's just going to come in with a little bit more of a chip on his shoulder than the others when it comes to a tournament that might kind of have a bit of an asterisk next to it. And I don't want to go too deep into it because ultimately this is subject to change. I want to see their form. I want to see their tennis. I want to see what they look like. But from what I saw from the Adria Tour, man, Dominic Thiem was as explosive as ever. Looked like he hadn't lost a step. I was so impressed with his movement. Thiem is a guy who likes to be well behind the baseline, to use his power, and to position himself on clay. You know, when he positions himself well behind the baseline, he's able to both defend and build offensively from the same position, which is very unique. But when it comes to progressing in Thiem's offense, I was very impressed with how well he was moving forward into the court. Because once you build from the back of the court, once you get your short ball, you know, you really got to press up a little bit. You need to make that, you need to have that transition game. I was really impressed with Thiem's movement. Again, not just laterally, but also the north-south movement. So explosive. And Djokovic just wasn't in the physical condition that Dominic Thiem was in. Not even close. And they never ended up playing because Djokovic didn't make that final. But if they did, I would have heavily favored Thiem, fast four format and all. Don't get me wrong, I'm not putting a lot of weight into what I saw on the Adria Tour last weekend. I just thought I'd comment on their games and compare and contrast. Ultimately, physically and mentally, I think Thiem has a bigger advantage than usual. And regardless, I think he's ready. If you remember, I picked Dominic Thiem to win the US Open at the start of the year. So I'm just not changing right now. Next one is from SapSave. I don't remember who, but a member of Djokovic's team said that currently Novak's biggest obstacle at the French is Thiem and not Rafa. Thoughts on this? Even if that's true, that's blasphemous. I mean, have a little respect, right? Now, I actually did not see this comment, so I don't even know that this is true. So let me just throw that out there right now. I'm just taking this commenter's word for it. But yeah, I mean, it's silly, it's disrespectful, but at the same time, you know, if it's mental warfare, if it's a jab, if it's a poke, if it's someone in Djokovic camp just trying to be an agitator, all right, whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't have that. I don't care that much about this kind of stuff. It's like I care more about what the players say than what the players, you know, family says. And I know something's going around right now. Djokovic's father basically took a shot at Federer for still playing, basically saying the only reason Federer is still playing is because he can't get over the fact that Nadal and Djokovic are going to pass him. It's like, okay, I don't know what even to say about that. Like, why should we care what Djokovic's father thinks of Federer still playing? Like, that opinion means absolutely nothing to me. And I don't think it should mean anything to you either. But again, like, even if Novak's biggest obstacle at the French is Thiem, it's still disrespectful to even go there based on what Nadal has done, you know? I mean, you got to put your money where your mouth is at a certain point. Hey, Gill, 2 questions. 1, last time I asked how Joker/Nadal's games would evolve late into their careers, you said that Rafa's overall skills are better suited for longevity, but Novak doesn't seem to be aging as much, and he has the serve advantage. That's right. You didn't quantify it, though. How many more years do you think each will be regularly getting into the semis/finals of slams? What is the last slam that you think each will win, and at what age? I'm going to be honest. I hate predicting longevity. You've probably heard me say that before, but to predict longevity is such a futile activity. I will do it anyway. Just know I'm not happy about it. I would say I'll give Nadal 3 more years and Djokovic 4 more years. So that would put Nadal playing. Oh, that would have them both playing until 37. I don't think there's going to be a large portion of their careers where they're playing but not winning. And maybe I'm wrong. That's just a gut feeling, but something tells me as soon as Rafa Nadal is the number 10 player in the world, I don't really think he's going to still be sticking around, because that probably means he's just not healthy and he's playing through pain. To me, A equals B. Again, purely speculative. So I'll give them both until 37, which would be 3 more years for Nadal, 4 more years for Djokovic. I think Djokovic, to answer the second part of your question, is increasingly getting better and better on faster surfaces. If you asked me in 2011, I would still tell you Djokovic's best surface is hard court, but I'd say French Open versus Wimbledon, I might think that it's pretty close. That Djokovic is a great clay court player and a good great grass court player, and it would be tough for me to discern between the two. At this point in his career, I'm quite confident that Djokovic is a better grass court player, just because he's not the same physical titan that he was in the early 2010s. I think that made him a lot tougher to beat on clay than he is now, with the long rallies and all. And Nadal, I mean, his best surface is, I don't think we'll ever reach a point where Nadal's best surface is in clay. Second part of this comment is the following. Thiem has made incredible strides with his game on faster courts recently. Over the last 12 months, he won 3 of his 5 hard court titles with near wins at the ATP Finals and the Aussie Open. He is now 4-1 against the Big Three in his last 5 hard court matches against them. Do you think Thiem becomes the best player in the world on both hard and clay courts over the next 12 to 18 months? And could he ever make a similar improvement on grass and have a run at Wimbledon? Well, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. 12 to 18 months could be pushing it with how well Nadal and Djokovic are still playing. We'll have to see how Federer comes back in 2021, if he comes on strong, or if he begins to fade. Who knows? So the time frame might be a little bit aggressive if we're gonna measure it as best in the world, because best in the world to me means that he has earned that title and he is head and shoulders, alone at the top. I think it's much more likely that over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, it becomes very clear that he is not only that he's a contender, that he is in the mix. I know there's another popular tennis podcast that's obsessed with the mix. I didn't mean to make a reference to that, but I did unintentionally. But the point is, I think that we will reach a point very, very soon where, regardless of surface, there's a strong possibility that Dominic Thiem could go all the way. If we're not there already, we might be there already. So progression, best in the world, 12 to 18 months, seems a little aggressive, but he's coming. The next comment is from Jose Moreno. What do you think about the 4 consecutive tournaments from the U.S. Open to Roland Garros? Is this a good chance for the NextGen, or is it just a big injury risk? It's a big chance for anyone who's physically fit enough to go through this gauntlet. So just to lay out what we have here, Washington, D.C., Cincinnati, U.S. Open, and then Kitzbühel after the U.S. Open, which is going to be a break for most players, but Dominic Thiem will play. And then you have Madrid and Rome, and then the French. So that is 4 Masters 1000s, 2 majors, and a 250 or a 500. Apologize if I said 250. I don't remember if Kitzbühel is a 500 or a 250. But over the course of, basically it's nonstop. So it's going to be really physically difficult, but I don't think it's a chance. Look, the next gen, if the next gen think that Djokovic is going to play every tournament and gas out, that's not going to happen. We already know that that Djokovic and Nadal are going to take care of their body and prioritize the majors. They've done that consistently. They'll continue to do that. With that being said, they might not be in the draw for some of these Masters 1000s. So that's in itself an opportunity. Is this going to be physically demanding? Yeah. So we're going to see who's in shape. It's going to be interesting. But I would say it yes and no. Is it a chance at the majors? Probably not. But is it a chance outside of the majors? Yeah. Next comment is from Ollie Patton. Isn't the safe option for Rafa just to play clay this year and skip U.S. Open? He's the massive favorite to win Roland Garros, to finally equal the Grand Slam record. Why potentially put it in jeopardy by getting injured on hard court, even more likely after a long break? In my opinion, he should come back on the clay and, parentheses, hopefully win Roland Garros number 20. I think that might be a really good option. It might be a really good option for Nadal. That way he could train a ton on clay, get himself physically ready for like a 4-week grind. And it's likely that if Djokovic plays Cincinnati and the US Open, it's likely he's going to have to he'll have to pace himself. So there's two approaches. You can like take a break in between. You can take a break after the US Open, or you could skip the hard court portion and then, train really hard, get ready, get yourself in shape, and then do the whole clay court season. It might be smart for Nadal to just do the whole clay court season. Ultimately, like I'm not gonna act like Nadal's advisor here, but I do think that option to just go hard for 4 weeks, the 2 Masters tournaments and then Roland Garros, it does make sense. I do think he should consider it, and I think he will. Then again, it's hard to skip a major, man. This is still the U.S. Open. Next comment from Amin Dalal. Hey, Gill, Stan played his best tennis at age 29 and reached his best ranking too. Do you think it can be the case for guys like Dimitrov and Raonic, considering that they are at the same age right now? I love what I see from Dimitrov. If you remember what I predicted at the beginning of the year, I predicted Dimitrov to finish the year in the top 10. That was probably my most controversial pick in my year-end top 10. I don't know, what's he, 19 in the world now. So Grigor has had shoulder issues, as I talked about in Wednesday's video when I went over his serve technique adjustment. But if he's healthy, I do like him to make another run. Raonic has been very up and down, very hot and cold. He's had injury concerns of his own. It's really hard to read his career right now. I think both have a chance for another surge, but you also need to step back and think about what the ceiling is for both. And I don't think either have. I think both can maybe get back into the top 10, but not by much. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but I that's the best I can do here. I would be more bullish on Dimitrov getting back into the top 10 than I would Raonic, though. Sachin says, who of the real Grand Slam contenders, pretty much the top 6, I guess, do these circumstances favor most between the long layoff, not much rest time, smaller teams, and no crowds? That's the first question. Yeah, Thiem is kind of my answer because he can handle it physically. Smaller teams, I don't think that's going to be much of a factor. The U.S. Open is, I think most of the top players will bring who they want to bring because the U.S. Open is allowing players to rent out private homes outside of Manhattan. And I think most of the top players who can afford it will take advantage of that. The players maybe a rung below have the option to rent out a second hotel room, which would enable them to bring 3 team members. Or if they want to bring a family member, if they have, let's say, a partner, they can bring their partner and then 2 team members. So there are options there. I don't think that'll make much of a difference. No crowds. Here's the thing. this might be hard to hear for some people, but crowds don't play into a tennis match probably as much as people want to think they do. And I would love to do a good deep, data dive into this, and maybe someday someone will do this or I'll do this. But, I just read an interesting book. I read John Wertheim's book with Tobias Moskowitz called Scorecasting. And they analyzed why the home team wins so much more often in almost every single team sport, whether it be soccer, football, basketball, baseball, hockey. The home team usually wins, and something that we take for granted. But if you really break down why and you use data to figure out why, it's largely because the crowd influences the officiating. It's quite the revelation. Don't take my word for it. Read the book. But in general, I don't think no crowds is going to affect tennis much because, you don't clearly see French players doing better than usual at the French Open or American players doing better than usual at the US Open, outside of the fact that they're generally playing on surfaces that they train on a ton and perhaps year round, or not year round, but they grew up on. And then I do think that there's some extra motivation for the American players and the French players. And then you have an extra comfort factor. I know John Isner would probably take exception and say I'm way better in the United States. So it's hard to say for sure, but look, Tim Henman didn't win Wimbledon. It took forever for a British person to win Wimbledon. French person hasn't won since Yannick Noah, and then it was a while before then. An American hasn't won the U.S. Open in forever. When's the last time an Australian won the Australian Open? I'm gonna do a quick search because I don't think Rafter won it. Did he? Maybe he did. Hold on. Okay, so list of Australian Open champions here. Let's go to, let's see. I'm in the 90s here. Oh, what the heck? It's been a really long time, hasn't it? Do you have to go back to Mark Edmondson in 1976? Wow. I got to say, that's worse than I thought because, a lot of players didn't play the Australian Open. Even in the 90s, sometimes players would skip it. So that's surprising. Wielander, Edberg, Lendl, Becker, Courier, Sampras, Agassi, that's kind of the 90s. And then in the 80s, Vilas won it twice. Vitas Gerulaitis won it once. Connors won it once. But then, it was really in 1976, Mark Edmondson won. John Newcomb, another Aussie, won it in 75. Newcomb won it. And then if you go early 70s, you have Rosewall and Laver won it in 1969. So, again, we need I would love a empirical study to be done on this, but I don't think that the fact that there's going to be no crowds, I don't think it's going to play too much of a factor. And I know I'm just talking about home crowds, right? But what about Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer in that matchup? The crowd hasn't really propelled Federer to too many victories recently. Are you going to continue the classic match analysis? Yeah, I'm going to do a couple more of those for sure. But thank you for the feedback. I like to hear that. If I hear that you guys like stuff, I'll keep doing them. 3, where would you rank Federer among the best pure baseliners, both of all time and currently? So all time, I'd put him behind Borg, Nadal, and Djokovic. And then I'd probably put him ahead of everyone else. the way the game has changed, it's going to be that question, best pure baseliner, that's going to be biased towards recent times. That's just how it's going to be. And then right now, I would say it'd be pretty similar, although perhaps at this point, pure baseliner, Dominic Thiem is probably better at this point. Next comment, they want to see me do the 2013 Roland Garros semifinal between Nadal and Djokovic because it's finally on YouTube. Yes, I plan to. All right. I'm not going to go much past 30 minutes here. Too many comments to get to them all. Hi, Gill. Love the show, but I've somehow never asked a question here. Now that it's official, we're going to have Grand Slams behind closed doors and no fans. I had an idea about crowd sourcing or sourcing crowd feedback remotely. How about we source live audio from viewers tuning into a Zoom-esque mass webinar kind of platform, say a 100 plus people / households for all matches with maybe 1,000 plus for the main courts. All of the incoming audio would be played on the court PA systems controlled at all times by a DJ / official who mutes the feed as soon as play starts back up and mixes in some music to aid the atmosphere. Even better, we can have selective video reactions from spectators to show up on the screen in between points. There could also be a live decibel meter showing up on screen to give us a sense of how much people are enjoying the matchup. I would love for it to be open directly to the ticket holders first, those who lost out on watching it live, and have them participate before we open it up to the rest of the public. To be clear, this would be completely separate to the eventual broadcast feed that the general public would get to view on TV. This would just be part of the production, so to speak. It would be difficult to organize, but I think if we come up with a good product, a lot of live sports events would be interested in it, I'm sure. I know there's a lot of questions about how TV-friendly such an event is going to be, and I do feel once the tennis starts, the tennis will deliver. At any rate, if a Grand Slam is underway, you bet I'll be tuning in. That's why we need to start thinking of innovative ways we could create the ideal product that could make the best of the situation we find ourselves in. All right, a TV geek question right up my alley because I am one. Tennis is in an interesting spot when it comes to piped-in crowd noise. I've seen it work really well, and I've seen it work really poorly. UTS tried to do it. I do not think it sounded good. I do not think it sounded natural. I don't think it worked. At the same time, I did watch some Premier League soccer this afternoon between Tottenham and Manchester United, who played to a 1-1 draw, in case you were interested. And the piped-in crowd was fantastic. I mean, it sounded very authentic. It sounded very realistic, but I suppose we shouldn't be surprised because we have something like FIFA that has perfected algorithms that are designed to, basically make an artificial crowd sound like a real crowd. So it sounded great in soccer and it didn't sound good in UTS. Overall, I think that because as tennis fans we're used to silence during the point, I don't think that the challenge is going to be as daunting. However, something does need to be figured out. What I mean by that is for some sports, it's going to be quite awkward. While the ball is in play, it might be kind of difficult. I think, a sport like, every sport is different. I'm not going to go through them, but baseball, for example, has a murmur, a constant murmur. It would be weird without the murmur. Football also really benefits from the environment and the crowd getting loud on defense for the home team, if the home team's on defense or so on. I do think that tennis is in a pretty good spot since tennis fans are used to silence, but they do need to figure out something. I don't think piping in crowd noise is probably the best idea in tennis. I don't see it. If it's done well, it'll work. But I do wonder about options such as music between points, or options such as miking up, the coach's box, or doing interesting things with the broadcast. I'm not sure if piping in crowd is going to be the best idea. However, if your idea could work, that'd be kind of cool. That would work. All right. I will go for 5 more minutes here. Under 25 plus team power rankings for career potential. Okay, under 25 plus team. Number 1, I will put Thiem. Although he's old, I'm still going to put him number 1. Thiem, Jannik Sinner, Tsitsipas, Carlos Alcaraz, Medvedev, Zverev. Now we will go to Shapovalov, Berrettini, Alex de Minaur, and then I'll put at number 10 Borna Coric if he turns things around, which I think he could. Karen Montgomery, can you go over the tactics? By the way, I think the most difficult part of that list is Shapovalov through Berrettini. I'm not really sure. Yeah, so that includes de Minaur. I think that group is the group that I feel most uncertain about. You know, who will really make that leap? That'll be interesting to see. Can you go over the tactics Tsitsipas needs to use to win against Djokovic and Nadal? Also, can you talk a bit about the strengths and weaknesses of Stefanos' serve and how they affect those matchups? Thanks. I'm curious to see if Tsitsipas is going to improve his serve, because to me, it looks like there's more power to be unlocked there. Maybe I'll do something with Jeff Salzenstein about the next-gen serves. Perhaps I want to start doing some things like that. That's in the pipeline. But to me, I mean, he falls off to his left. It just looks like he could get more out of his serve. So I do wonder if he'll start to improve that serve. Djokovic and Nadal, it's all about getting ahead in the rally for Tsitsipas. It's all about first strike tennis, serve plus forehand. He is best when he is playing with margin on his forehand and approaching the net. That's when he's best, because he has such a great transition game, but he needs to use it. As soon as he tries to become a grinding baseliner, it's not good, or even an aggressive baseliner. I mean, he really needs to use his all-court game. That's when he's at his best. Hey, Gill, can you give your insights on the advantages that Andy Murray has in terms of tennis prowess had helped him overcome the big three? Has he overcome the big three? Well, yeah, I'm a little bit confused by what the question is asking, but I'll give you top 3 strengths of Andy Murray. How about that? The number 1 strength is his consistency. Number 2 is his feel for the court, moving the ball around, using the geometry of the court. What Murray will do, he's not overly proficient at finishing the point, but he's great at moving you around. And number 3 is his fitness. Number 2 maybe should be his fitness. But when you put all those things combined, when you see Murray play lesser opponents, he will run you until you miss. You know, he doesn't need a big forehand. He doesn't need to come to the net and hit great volleys. He doesn't need, you know, the biggest serve in the world, because he will just move you around until you are exhausted and you miss. We will end on, let's see, we're at 33 minutes. Yeah, let's end on this one. What are the most underrated shots / aspects of the big three's games? Also, what do you think is the most underrated player's shot in tennis? Big three, I think Nadal and Djokovic are a similar deal. I think Djokovic's backhand is so good that his forehand is underrated. We got to that at the beginning of the show. And I think Nadal's forehand is so good that his backhand is way underrated. Nadal's backhand, he has so much variety on that shot that people don't realize. His slice has gotten really good, but even on his drive backhand, the way he mixes up heights and spins, he's able to flatten it out. He is extremely comfortable going down the line. He can hit it close stance. He can hit it open stance. He defends on his backhand side better than he does on his forehand side. The Nadal backhand has is very underrated. There's been points in his career where it's dipped a little, but certainly over the last 2-3 years, way underrated. For Federer, it's his endurance, his fitness. I mean, you rarely see Federer get tired. And sometimes people point that out, but if you think that that's just a product of like Federer ends the points quickly, you're kidding yourself. Federer has really great fitness, and I think because something about the way he moves around the court, people look at it as something other than fitness. People like to look at it as like grace, or which he does. I mean, the way he moves his feet, it's extremely graceful, but that doesn't mean he's not in unbelievable shape. I think he has probably underrated cardio and tremendous muscular endurance. He rarely gets tired, and that's extremely underrated with Federer. Most underrated shot in tennis, period. Whoa. Probably at this point, the Tsitsipas forehand, maybe. Maybe it's the Dominic Thiem. No, everyone knows. I don't know. Underrated is tough because now we're measuring public perception. Maybe the Wawrinka forehand, same thing. I mean, people are so obsessed with the Wawrinka backhand that nobody realizes how good his forehand is because his backhand is pretty. So that's one for sure. Yeah, I think that's it. That's my top two. Maybe the Tsitsipas and the Wawrinka forehand. I like Wawrinka forehand though. That's a good pick. I also think Monfils, people don't talk about how good his down the line backhand is. Great down the line backhand. All right. Better stop me before I start talking about Jan-Lennard Struff's drop volleys, right? Sorry if I didn't get to your question, but I will continue to do this from time to time. If it's an evergreen question, feel free to go back here, copy paste your question, ask it again. I'm sure at some point I will get to it. Looking forward to the Adria Tour this weekend as it hits Croatia along with UTS. Another great week of content coming. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.